Okay, welcome back. This is going to be part two of the machine learning part. I'll be able to do about an hour, longer than that, maybe even like 2 hours if I'm really feeling it, which I'm absolutely not. This was kind of a struggle to even do this much. I was able to finish a part one, however, where I spent probably 3-4 hours just watching the video, but I did not finish the questions yet, so that's what I'll be doing for part two. So this is lesson 5. Yep, and then these are the questions for lesson 5. Traditionally, answering the questions has taken me a long time, at least an hour, sometimes over 3 hours. So let's get started. So does ethics provide a list of right answers? I think very clearly the answer to that is going to be no, but we'll pull up the book and have a look at what the answer is, or what the book has to say about that question. Yeah, so there is no, so in answering the question, what is ethics, the Markula Center for Applied Ethics says that the term refers to well-rounded standards of right and wrong that prescribe what humans ought to do, the study and development of one's ethical standards. Wow. Ethics is the study and development of ethics. There is no list of right answers. There is no list of do and don't. Ethics is complicated and context dependent. It involves the perspectives of many stakeholders. Ethics is a muscle that you have to develop and practice. In this chapter, our goal is to provide some signposts to help you on that journey. Alright, so question number 2. How can working with people of different backgrounds help when considering ethical questions? So let's see what the book has to say about that. Here we go. So spotting ethical issues is best to do as part of a collaborative team. This is the only way you can really incorporate different perspectives. Different people's backgrounds will help them to see things which may not be obvious to you. Working with a team is helpful for many muscle building activities, including this one. So the question is, how can working with people of different backgrounds help when considering ethical questions? My answer to that is going to be what was in the book. Different people's backgrounds will help them to see things which may not be obvious to you. Yeah, it's also really nice if you can blend strengths and weaknesses on a team too. I lived with somebody who was really good at math for a while, and it's not that I'm bad at math. It's just that I never studied it in college. And the person I lived with had gone on and studied it a lot post-secondary. So I had a lot of questions that math could solve, and I was able to work with this person and get an answer to those questions, and I was able to create some Python code doing that I couldn't have created on my own. And then of course the person I was talking to didn't know Python, so together working in a team, having differing abilities and backgrounds, really created a better result than I could have ever created on my own. All right, what was the role of IBM in Nazi Germany? Why did the company participate as it did? Why did the workers participate? Wow. Okay. Well, that's a big one. Question number 3. So, I mean, I remember from the video they created a inventory system for the prisoners at the camps. And the reason they did it, from what I understand, is just it was really profitable. They were talked into it by the world leaders and stood to make a buck, and they made a buck. And the workers participated. I think a big reason why you could have a whole company like that participate would be just they probably didn't see it. I would think, you know. Well, I wouldn't know about that. I'd be interested to see what the book says about why the workers participated. But in my own view, I mean, why would the workers participate? Well, I could imagine a scenario where the workers didn't know, and it's all the leadership who knows what it's actually being used for. I could also imagine a scenario where the workers don't have the ability to just quit, because especially in this time in history, the Great Depression, let's look up that. So the Great Depression, USA. Yeah, so let's do a timeline, the Great Depression timeline. Okay, yeah, so 1929 to 1941. Yeah, I'm not sure when. Let's see if the book has some dates for this. So let's take a look at IBM. Okay, so here we go. So one particularly hideous example of what happens when technologists focus on technology at all costs. See, this is kind of what I was getting at, where I would say, why did the workers participate? Well, because they're just creating technology. They don't necessarily know why they're creating that technology, what it's going to be used for, or the ethics behind it, and that's really important to consider. That's the whole point of this chapter of the book, that it's really not absolving yourself of harm to just say, oh, you know, it's just math, it's just a product, you use it the way you want to use it. I cannot be held responsible for how it is used, I think is probably what they're getting at, which, if they are making that argument, that has pretty big implications, because companies like Facebook and Twitter, I believe, take the viewpoint that they're just creating a car. You know, I'm just creating a piece of technology. It's not my fault that somebody would choose to ram their car into somebody. All I did was made the car. I think that's how those tech companies think of it. But of course, you know, if you make a car that has a gun mounted on it, that's a different story. But of course, and then of course you never know, like, oh, well, maybe you didn't mount a gun on your car, but what if the tires have a defect and spray metal, as you know, as if they were bullets whenever you drive, and whenever you drive past a crowd, you spray metal off of these defective tires, and it kills people in the crowd. Is the company liable for that? So it gets very complicated very fast, and there's really no clear cut there's really and that's kind of the point of the book too, that they're getting at. There is no list of right answers. There's no right answers. There's no do's and don'ts. It's something that has to always be considered and looked at. In 2001, a Swiss judge ruled that it was not unreasonable to deduce that IBM's technical assistants facilitated the tasks of the Nazis, oh my god, in the commission of their crimes against humanity. acts also involving accountancy and classification by IBM machines and utilized in the concentration camps themselves. Wow. Yeah, and I know a little bit about my family tree. My grandfather actually, from what I understand, was either like the first or the second, like because when the Dachau camp, so there were, I think Dachau was a, how was it called? Dachau concentration camp. Oh yeah. Here it is. So hopefully I'm not going to be showing mass graves and stuff. I never thought I'd be doing that sort of thing on this channel. It's supposed to all be technical, but I want to do this because I want to, like, we all decided to do this together. And okay, good. Well, not good. This is horrific too. A bunch of Jewish women just lined up. Oh man, it's so bad. But it's history. Important to learn it. And I know a little bit about the Dachau camp specifically, because my grandfather went to the Dachau camp. I don't know exactly what he did. He wasn't very forthcoming about it. He never went on record to say what he witnessed. From what I understand, he was just pretty much a troop on the ground and not any sort of historian or journalist or upper level troop that would go and account, take an account and report back what they saw. He was, from what I understand, I mean, I don't really know that much about it, and I certainly don't want to get it wrong, but I do know for a fact that he won the Bronze Star for acts of bravery, and it was an act of bravery that I believe was associated with liberation of the Dachau concentration camp. So he actually saw the piles of bodies and stuff firsthand, because there was an order by oh, I forget. Shoot. Yeah. Here we go. So yeah, the liberation. So like he was like literally like, I think like either his unit is like literally like called out in this article, or his unit came like a week or a little bit like after this article was written, from what I understand. So like, yeah, I wish I could find what I'm. Here we go. So yeah, like this isn't my grandfather here, but he probably like he was American Army serviceman during the initial hours of Dachau's liberation, so he might have even been in the same unit as this guy, as far as I know, and so that could be true from what I understand. I mean, I can ask my parents, but I actually don't even know if they know, because he just did not want to talk. I actually had the honor to interview him when I was like 13 for a school project, but I was not. I was always kind of a goofy kid who never really took a lot of things seriously, so I didn't do a great job of it. There is some recordings of me talking to him about it, But I really asked just kind of basic questions, and he really didn't give very detailed answers. He just really didn't like to talk about seeing piles and piles of dead bodies for some reason, right? Okay. All right, so moving on here. A Swiss judge ruled that it was not unreasonable to, oh yeah, I read that already. IBM UC supplied the Nazis with data tabulation products necessary to track the extermination of Jews and other groups on a massive scale. This was driven from the top of the company with marketing to Hitler and his leadership team. Company President Thomas Watson personally approved the 1939 release of special IBM alphabetizing machines to help organize the deportation of Polish Jews. But this was not an isolated incident. The organization's involvement was extensive. IBM and its subsidiaries provided regular training and maintenance on site at the concentration camps, printing off cards, configuring machines, and repairing them as they broke frequently. Okay, well, there goes my theory that their workers just didn't know about it, because it looks like they actually provided training and maintenance on site. IBM set up, I mean, of course, that could be, special workers. They might not set up everyone, or could be special secret representatives from the company that go and do this. But still, that's just sad. I didn't know this about IBM. IBM set up categorizations on its punch card system for the way that each person was killed, which group they were assigned to, and the logistical information necessary to track them through the vast Holocaust system. IBM's code for Jews in the concentration camps was 8. Some 6 million were killed. Its code for Romanians was 12. They were labeled by the Nazis as asocials, with over 300,000 killed in the Lager, or gypsy camp. General executions were coded as 4, death in the gas chambers as 6. Yeah, it's and the thing that really gets me is the Holocaust deniers too, because like they have these punch cards and stuff. They have like there's just so much. It's just for me, it's like it's literally like tiring to think about the Holocaust, because it's just such a sad thing that happened, and the worst part is we're not even over it. Like those impulses to that led to the Holocaust are very much part of humanity, and something that that very much is, a lot of people will say, oh well, the Nazis and the Holocaust was just a horrific, inhumane, carried out by monsters, carried out by the worst of humanity, unimaginable, inhuman monsters. Well, in my mind, like, if that were true, we wouldn't be seeing that happen again. There's camps everywhere. There's camps in North Korea, there's camps in China, there's camps in the USA. It's just this, it's nothing like well, I actually wouldn't like to speak about this too much. I do want to keep this channel focused on technology, and really not necessarily history, although I do invite anyone watching this right now who wants to learn more to spend some time learning history. I do think that's important. I do think it's important to have accurate, well-rounded views of the world at large and of history, both of your own country and of countries around the world. Okay, but let's try to stick more to what's on the book, and I kind of, if I may, please, I would like to focus more just on getting these questions answered. The marketers were just doing what they could to meet their business development goals. Oh, here we go. Of course, the project managers and engineers and technicians involved were just living their ordinary lives, caring for their families, going to the church on Sunday, doing their best jobs as they could, following orders. The marketers were just doing what they could to meet their business development goals. As Edwin Black, author of IBM and the Holocaust, Dialogue Press observed, to the blind technocrats, that means they were more important than the ends. Oh, the means were more important than the ends. The destruction of the Jewish people became even less important because of the invigorating nature of IBM's technical achievement was only heightened by the fantastical profits to be made at a time when bread lines stretched across the world. Yeah. At a time when bread lines stretched across the world. See, this is what I mean. Like, this is what I spoke to earlier when I said that. What did I even say? I forget. Oh, right. I looked up the timeline of the Great Depression. Because I wanted to see if these workers might be in a situation where they actually can't even quit their jobs, otherwise they'd starve and they wouldn't be able to live comfortably during a time when most people weren't able to. Step back for a moment and consider, how would you feel if you discovered that you had been, well, you know what? So step back for a moment and consider, how would you feel if you discovered that you had been part of a system that ended up hurting society? Okay, anyone watching this right now, I hate to break it to you, but if you go to the WHO and you go to meat diet, yeah, so meat is a known carcinogen. It causes, or red meat anyway, like it's, you know, I used to have a lot of meat. I used to have barbecue. I used to have everything, and with everything that has been going on in the United States, and just realizing, you know, just how like little disregard there is for human life here. It's like I just realized that you know, if I wanted to do something harmful to myself and to society, there's there's not going to be any consequences for it. I'm just going to continue to do it. It's on me to do what's right, because society is not going to set me up for it. And I personally have been trying to switch to a vegan diet and kind of a lifestyle too, not using animal products anymore too, because I just think that's the very least I can do. Is basically just means buying different things that I would have bought, and maybe even end up saving money once I figure out what to buy, and eating better foods, because the city I'm from has a lot of good vegan restaurants. So it's like this question here. How would you feel if you discovered that you had been part of a system that ended up hurting society? We all are. I mean, red meat is something that causes cancer. It's something that causes heart disease. We're all a part of that, and a lot of people, they don't feel anything because they just don't believe that it's true. So would you be open to finding out? I mean, I'm open to finding out. Um, but the thing is, the question is, if you are part of a system that hurts society, are you able to find out? Because would you intentionally and knowingly hurt society? And if you wouldn't, how would you ever be able to believe that you were hurting society? Nobody could convince you that you were. You'd be absolutely unconvincible. Because if you were hurting society, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. So what you're doing is not hurting society in your mind, even though it's very clearly hurting society. There's no way you can be convinced. So these questions I feel are a little bit unfair because it's just, you know, how can you help make sure this doesn't happen? You know, that's a good question. I don't know. Like, even for my kind of second thoughts about meat, in just in my own life, and dairy, it's like, I mean, I can just stop consuming the products, but like, I can't do anything to like have the industry no longer continue. I mean, with the coronavirus, you know, people stopped eating meat, but like they just, you know, slaughtered the animals that they all had, and they brought in new animals, and they just kept, you know, doing it. Like, I honestly think like we could all stop eating meat or dairy overnight, and animals would still be slaughtered en masse. Just you know, and the product and the like. I just think these are really unfair questions to ask somebody who is not in any position to actually make a change. Um, but I do think it's important to yeah, I don't know, but I mean, this is what I'm doing right now. I'm stepping back for a moment and I'm considering, number one, how would I feel if I discovered I had been part of a system that ended up hurting society? And my answer to that is, how would I feel? I mean, it's just devastated. Like, it's just, it's almost, you know, I feel like that's an unfair question almost, because it's just so devastating to me, and maybe there's something different about me than there is other people, but it's just so, like, that's the best way I would feel devastated. Like, that's it. I would feel devastated. Would you be open to finding out? So my answer to that is yes. How can you help make sure this doesn't happen? And my answer to that is you can't, depending on where you are on the totem pole, depending on what pull you have, what powers you have. You absolutely cannot. Like, it's just, there are you know, there are forces, there are powers that, you know, I think you can, you know, and I don't know, maybe I'm just maybe I'm just thinking about this a little bit too deeply for my own life, because uh, I don't know, there's just really personal questions, and I actually wouldn't, I actually don't really feel comfortable discussing questions personally on a public video like this. I, I think what I've answered so far maybe has been thought-provoking. Um, I hope, and if anyone's watching this, I urge you to answer these questions yourself and think about it, and maybe, yeah, maybe if, yeah, like, I guess I was gonna say that I'd be curious if your answers are different than mine, but I kind of, I kind of want to focus on like, yeah, I mean these. Okay, well here you can see these questions are profoundly impactful on me. They have great disruptive power on my thinking and my thought processes. So they can really derail me and really affect the work I do, these kinds of questions. So I honestly, do my best to make sure that my career is ethical, do my best to make sure that I'm working for an employer that I trust. But once I'm hired, and it's my career. What am I gonna do? Like, it's a similar situation as the workers at IBM. It's like, it's like, how would you feel if you discovered you've been part of a system that ended up hurting society? So how would I feel if I believed I had been? I would feel devastated. But the more honest answer, how would I feel if I discovered it, but it was not proven to me? I would feel very skeptical, and I probably wouldn't believe it. And would I be open to finding out? Probably not, because I just wouldn't believe that I was hurting society. That's if I was in a system that was designed to hurt society and that exploited and manipulated me to do so, I would not feel that I was being exploited and manipulated. I would just feel normal. I would feel productive and happy and healthy. And I would resist heavily finding out that what I was doing was harmful. That is the true, honest answer to those questions. How would you feel if you discovered you had been part of a system that ended up hurting society? I would feel skeptical, and I wouldn't believe the claims. How would you be open to finding out? No, I would resist and reject the information. But yeah, but that's if I didn't believe it. And in my own personally, and of course I like not to talk too much about myself personally. I just don't think that's a good idea on the public internet like this. But I'm limiting. I've for the last just about 2 weeks, I've been completely vegan because I do think a lot about these ethical questions. We have described the most extreme situation here, but there are many negative societal consequences linked to AI and machine learning being observed today, some of which we'll discuss described in this chapter. It's not just a moral burden either. Sometimes technologists pay very directly for their actions. For instance, the first person who was jailed as a result of the Volkswagen scandal, where the car company was revealed to have cheated on its diesel emissions tests, was not the manager that oversaw the product or the executive at the helm of the company. It was one of the engineers, James Lang, who just did what he was told. Of course, it's not all bad if a project you are involved in turns out to make a huge positive impact on even one person. This is going to make you feel really great. Okay, so hopefully we have convinced you that you ought to care. Okay, well, hopefully we've got the answer here to this question. So what was their role in Nazi? Oh my god, it was so bad. So the role was the organization's involvement was extensive, necessary regular training on site, cards, so yeah. Oh. Okay, so here's the answer. Okay, now why did they participate the way they did? Yeah. We're just living our lives, caring for the families, going to church, doing the best they could, following orders. Yeah. yeah, so they participated the way they did because they stood to make fantastical profits at a time when everyone else was just completely poor, and they had the ability to actually put their technology to practice and scale it up and really uh, apply the technology in a practical way, and that was to them a project they couldn't turn down because of how because of what's this here right here. Because of the invigorating nature of the technical achievement. Okay, so why did the workers participate? Fantastical profits. Yeah, so I'll just put that there. Okay, so moving on to the next one. Question 4. What was the role of the first person jailed in the Volkswagen diesel scandal? So I believe they were just an was not the manager that oversaw the project or an executive at the helm of the company. It was one of the engineers who just did what he was told. What was the problem with a database of suspected gang members maintained by Florida law enforcement officials? So I remember this one from the video. The data was not clean. It had members that were obvious. It had entries of people who were obviously not gang members because they were under a year old. So I don't know if a baby can belong to a gang, if they would pass the initiation, whatever it might be, but I would say that a baby is not going to be the perpetrator of a crime, especially one like Grand Theft Auto or arson. Okay, so let's see here. What was the problem with the database of suspected game numbers? Let's look this up. Oops, and it looks like it's 8:25 already. This video, oh yeah, it's already been like 37 minutes. So I'm gonna need to take a quick break. Let's just answer this question here. An additional reason why recourse is so necessary is because data often contain errors. The mechanisms for audits and error correction are critical. A database of suspected gang members maintained by California law enforcement officials was found to be full of errors, including 42 babies who had been added to the database when they were less than 1 year old, 28 of whom were marked as admitting to be gang members. In this case, there was no process in place for correcting mistakes or removing people once they've been added. And the thing is, even if there was a process, would people really follow it? Because if your project is constantly stalled and delayed for, the one nerdy guy in the room, me, who actually reads the rules and follows them, how far is that guy gonna go? That guy's probably not gonna be moving up very quick. Alright, so why did YouTube's recommendation algorithm recommend videos of partially clothed children? Oh my god. Children to pedophiles, even though no employee at Google had programmed this feature. So this I remember from the video as well. It's because those people were seeking out that content. So the YouTube recommendation algorithm basically it optimizes for watch time, so it assumes that you will watch something similar to something you have already watched. So the things you look at are the things it tries to feed you with. So these people are looking up this content, um, and then YouTube is searching it out for them and feeding it to them, and it's yeah. So that kind of behavior is obviously um, a pretty severe bug in the algorithm. Yeah, and it definitely gets even crazier too, because what if you're using YouTube and you're not even trying to look up that sort of stuff. You're just looking up something innocuous, or you're looking up a video of someone and like there's a 10-year-old daughter of somebody in that video, and it's just like whatever it is, and all of a sudden now you're flooded with these videos, and then the first few are similarly innocuous. It's like, oh, I don't know what this is, and then you gradually are like, what if your own morality, your own character, your own volition is malleable to the point of you being able to be reshaped into a criminal, despite who you had considered yourself, despite what you consider your character to be. What if your character is malleable enough to be able to be changed and manipulated by these algorithms, so that even if you have no intention of this sort of thing, your intention can be cultivated and forced upon you, to the point where now you have this intention because this intention was installed into you. And like it just blows my mind to really think about that. There's one thing I really like, called the Dharma inquiry, that I learned from somebody I like to follow. So I think I personally don't really do a lot of journaling, but I think the best kind of well, I mean, I make these videos, maybe that counts, but I think the best kind of attack or defense against that kind of scenario that I talked is just having a really strong sense of who you are and a really strong sense of character and that sort of thing. And I think a way you can do that is through journaling. So I would recommend anyone who's really afraid of kind of being manipulated by algorithms or whatever. Maybe try journaling every day. I've heard that it actually can be pretty easy. Like, you don't have, like, a lot of people think journaling's like really hard, but I've heard that you can get like a sentence a day journals, and they'll say like, today I want to, and then you just buy a book, and on every single page it says today I want to, and then it has the calendar, and then just every day you say, today I want to finish my blood, take it easy, blah blah blah, and you just write down a few words, really easy, and you can journal every day by doing that, and you can really kind of figure out who you are, just in a matter of months, weeks and months, and if you want to be a different person, you can just write that on the next day and work towards being who you want to be. So let's see if we got the answer to this question. So, okay, let's see why they recommended that. Okay, so feedback loops. However, human beings tend to be drawn to controversial content. This means that videos about things like conspiracy theories started to get recommended more and more by the recommendation system. Furthermore, it turns out that the kinds of people that are interested in conspiracy theories are also people that watch a lot of online videos. So they started to get drawn more and more toward YouTube. The increasing number of conspiracy theorists watching videos on YouTube resulted in the algorithm recommending more and more conspiracy theory and other extremist content, which resulted in more extremists watching videos on YouTube and more people watching YouTube developing extremist views, which led to the algorithm recommending more extremist content. The system was spiraling out of control, and this phenomenon was not contained to this particular type of content. In June 2019, the New York Times published an article on YouTube's recommendation system titled "On YouTube's Digital Playground, an Open Gate for Pedophiles." This article started with this chilling story. Christiane C. didn't think anything of it when her 10-year-old daughter and friend uploaded a video of themselves playing in a backyard pool. A few days later, the video had thousands of views. Before long, it ticked up to 400,000. I saw the video again and I got scared by the number of views, Christiane said. She had reason to be. YouTube's automated recommendation system had begun showing the video to users who watched other videos of prepubescent, partially clothed women, children. A team of researchers has found. On its own, each video might be perfectly innocent, a home movie, say, made by a child. Any revealing frames are fleeting and appear incidental or accidental, but grouped together, their shared features become unmistakable. YouTube's recommendation algorithm had begun curating playlists for pedophiles, picking out innocent home videos that happened to contain prepubescent, partially clothed women. Children. No one at Google planned to create a system that turned family videos into porn for pedophiles. So what happened? Yeah, I'm reading this like really slowly and staggered because this just really like upsets me, because I actually read a book called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results at Google. I still have it. I forget what it was actually called, but it was about OKRs at Google, and there was a section about YouTube, and one of the managers at Google said, I want YouTube to be a place where people go to kind of connect with other people and stuff, and not a place where people go to share knowledge and learn things and grow themselves as people. And I just remember thinking that was just so wrong. Like YouTube, in my mind, shouldn't be a place where you are where the metric used is watch time. Like I think people just sitting and watching YouTube all day is horrible. Like how many times do people wish they get up off the couch and not just sit and watch TV all day? Designing a system to force a person to do that is just, in my mind, so wrong. Like, people need to be getting up, getting active, and a manager saying, I want my system to force people to sit down all day and do nothing and be sedentary and succumb to health disorders, triggered by sedentary lifestyles, in my mind is evil. Like, this person is causing harm to society by optimizing a metric that makes it so that people don't exercise as much. And I was really upset after I read that book, so I'm getting even more upset now, just kind of learning how badly YouTube has been managed. Okay, so part of the problem here is the centrality, and then the other thing is I've actually been getting recommendations I haven't been getting anything that I would consider uh, pedophile recommendations, although I had been getting, I do remember very clearly getting a recommendation of like a 10-year-old girl playing violin for some reason. Like I watched the video and I just thought like, okay, why am I constantly being recommended this? And then I watched, I didn't fall into the pedophile rabbit hole, but I just kind of remember being a little bit upset with YouTube because it's like, okay, cool, like this 10-year-old girl plays violin, wow, okay, I want to watch Heifetz, I want to watch Hillary Hahn, I want to watch the Masters play. Like, okay, cool, there's a 10-year-old girl playing. It doesn't do much for me. This is not why I'm using the platform of YouTube. I'd be using it to watch a master play violin, or to try to see some show that I wasn't able to see in person. So I was really upset that video was recommended to me, because it takes up space too. Like there's other videos, to flood my stream with videos I want to see, like. But even then, like, once I watched a video, I don't want to watch the same video. Like I finished doing the thing. Like why would I want to keep doing the thing if I finished doing the thing? It makes no sense to me at all, the way the creators of social media had envisioned them being used. Part of the problem here is the centrality of metrics in driving a financially important system. When an algorithm has a metric to optimize, as you have seen, it will do everything it can to optimize that number. This tends to lead to all kinds of edge cases, and humans interacting with a system will search for, find, and exploit these edge cases and feedback loops for their advantage. So let's see if we've got an answer to this. So, yep, we've just got one question here. So why did YouTube's recommendation algorithm recommend those videos? And it's because it was because the pedophiles were causing. So the pedophiles were causing the AI to produce feedback loops that delivered. The pedophiles were causing the AI to produce feedback loops that delivered the kind of content they wanted. Okay. So, what are the problems with the centrality of metrics? Centrality of metrics. Let's see. Oh, and I did need to take a quick break. I've got let's see here, metrics. Yeah, this is heavy, man. I didn't want to. I wanted to kind of. But of course, it's kind of good that I'm reading this too, because this is, we read about it. Like the IBM employees, just wanted to put their heads down and focus on their job and, get their paycheck and all that. But they were creating an inventory system for the victims of the Holocaust. So, I guess it's kind of a good thing that I'm really unable to do the same with this channel, and spending a whole series of videos really talking about this, because it's important. It's definitely important that everyone working in tech really considers the impact of their work. and even outside of tech, like just in general. It sucks. I realized like you might realize that you're just in deep, and how are you going to get out? But and then of course you might also be in the thing I talked about before, where you just can't understand that you're causing harm, and you just wouldn't believe it if somebody told you that could be happening too. So it's just hard. Okay, so here we go. So part of the problem here is the centrality of metrics in driving a financially important system. When an algorithm has a metric to optimize, as you have seen, it will do everything it can to optimize that number. This tends to lead to all kinds of edge cases, and humans interacting with a system will search for, find, and exploit these edge cases and feedback loops for their advantage. Okay, so here's the problem with centrality of metrics. It creates edge cases that can be exploited. Okay, I should be able to finish these questions pretty quick, actually. I'm already on the 8th question here. I'm gonna, well, it has been an hour. Whoops. And I'm not even halfway through. Whoops, might be another hour. But I'm gonna pause it quick, just get some water and be back. All right, we're back. Trying to get through. Oh, sorry. Actually, I took a break to do something that I didn't do. So I'm gonna go do that. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back for real this time. Next question is going to be, why did Meetup.com not include gender in its recommendation system for tech meetups? So let's find out the answer to that. Okay, so there are positive examples of people and organizations attempting to combat these problems. Ivan Estola, lead machine learning engineer at Meetup, discussed the example of men expressing more interest than women in tech meetups. Taking gender into account could therefore cause Meetup's algorithm to recommend fewer tech meetups to women, and as a result, fewer women would find out about and attend tech meetups, which could cause the algorithm to suggest even fewer tech meetups to women, and so on in a self-reinforcing feedback loop. So even and his team. Oh, it's Evan. So Evan and his team made the ethical decision for the recommendation algorithm to not create such a feedback loop by explicitly not using gender for that part of their model. Perfect. All right, let's read more about that. It's pretty interesting. It's encouraging to see a company not just unthinkingly optimize a metric, but consider its impact. According to Evan, you need to decide which feature not to use in your algorithm. The most optimal algorithm is perhaps not the best one to launch into production. While Meetup chose to avoid such an outcome, Facebook provides an example of allowing a runaway feedback loop to run wild. Like YouTube, it tends to radicalize users interested in one conspiracy theory by introducing them to more. I didn't know that YouTube actually was attempting to do that to me. I'm kind of thinking about anything I might be radicalized on conspiracy theory. Yeah, I don't know, but I think I've typically at least tried to be pretty careful with my YouTube usage. I mean, I guess, um, yeah. So I've tried to be pretty careful with my YouTube usage, but I'm pretty unsatisfied with it, as I have mentioned before. It just recommends way too much. And then it populates my homepage with stuff that, like, you know, I just feel um, used when I use it. Like it's just getting me to do what it wants me to do and not what I want to do. And when a computer makes me feel that way, I unplug it from the wall and smash it usually. All right. While Meetup chose to avoid such an outcome, Facebook provides an example of allowing a runaway. Okay. So yeah, Facebook did not do what Meetup did. So once people join a single conspiracy-minded Facebook group, they are algorithmically routed to a plethora of others. Join an anti-vaccine group. Oh, and your suggestions will include anti-GMO, chemtrail watch, flat earther, yes really, and curing cancer naturally groups. Rather than pulling a user out of a rabbit hole, the recommendation engine pushes them further back in. And these are the really insidious ones too, because it's like, if you've got cancer, man, like, you're probably really desperate to do something, and especially if you are working with the doctors and they're just telling you it's not going to go good, you know. That's really exploiting, really exploitative, really evil to have a con that where you're trying to sell people something to cure their cancer naturally or whatever. Trying to exploit people who are going through something like that. It is extremely important to keep in mind that this kind of behavior can happen, and to either anticipate a feedback loop. I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I am definitely getting a feedback loop for veganism, um, but it's not like I just out of the blue like am deciding to be vegan because of Facebook. It's like, you know, I've been thinking about it for a while, but um, I will say that in my opinion, I am actively in this sort of manipulative feedback loop on YouTube for adopting a vegan lifestyle. I do think that is true. It's a true statement. Is it something I'm upset by or want to not happen? Not necessarily, because I just think there's good arguments for that kind of lifestyle, and I think it's almost kind of it's not really a change that I'm kind of unhappy with. So, but I will that's something, because before I tried to think, oh well, is Facebook trying to, you know, I can't think of anything that I might be manipulated into believing because of my time on Facebook. And it's like, oh yeah, well, veganism is probably like, if I hadn't watched Facebook at all, I probably wouldn't be considering it as much as I am now. So that's just interesting to be aware of. Discussions of bias. Did I get the answer? Oh, no, yeah, here we go. So, what are the 6 types of bias in machine learning, according to Suresh and Gutag? All right. Here we go. Oh, nope. Oh, here we go. So here's the 6 types of bias. Here we go. So describe 6 types of bias. So here we go. We've got historical bias, representation bias, measurement bias, aggregation bias, evaluation bias, and deployment bias. So historical bias comes from the fact that people are biased, processes are biased, and society is biased. The authors say historical bias is a fundamental structural issue with the first step of the data generation process and can exist even given perfect sampling and feature selection. Okay, so let's learn about the next type of bias. Next type of bias is going to be measurement bias. Measurement bias, it occurs when our models make mistakes because we are measuring the wrong thing, or measuring it in the wrong way, or incorporating that measurement into the model inappropriately. Alright, so we've got 4 more types of bias. Aggregation bias. Aggregation bias occurs when models do not aggregate data in a way that incorporates all of the appropriate factors, or when the model does not include the necessary interaction terms, non-linearities, or so forth. Oops, and I accidentally did a Google search instead of copying it. Alright, so we've got 3 more biases left. Representation bias. So differences in true positive rates between genders are correlated with existing gender imbalances in occupations, which may compound these imbalances. In other words, the researchers noticed that models predicting occupation did not only reflect the actual gender imbalance in the underlying population, but actually amplified it. This type of representation bias is quite common. So I think, yeah, an example of that is if there's yeah, so here's an example. In the training data set, 14.6% of surgeons were women, yet in the model predictions, only 11.6% of the true positives were women. The model is thus amplifying the bias existing in the training set. Now that we've seen those biases exist, what can we do to mitigate them? Okay, so what is this called again? Representation bias. So representation bias, basically just if you've got a data set that doesn't represent the correct ratios of things, or like you're trying to classify as bears and you miss out, you don't have a particular kind of bear in there, it's going to misrepresent what you intended. So it's biased to represent the things found in your data set. So if your data set is a misrepresentation, then it's going to be biased to misrepresent. Oops, so it looks like we only ended up with 4 of them. We're missing 2. Yeah, so we've got measurement, aggregation, representation, but it looks like we're missing two more. Oh, we've also got historical bias. Did I include that one? I'm surprised I don't have, oh, I do have 4, so I'm missing 2 of them. So let's see if we've got, so maybe in this, we'll have to go to the offshoot here. A framework for understanding. Can I view the whole thing? I want to see the 6, so we got 6 pages, but how do I see, okay, let me download the PDF. Here we go, perfect. So, here they are. So we got historical bias, representation bias, measurement bias, aggregation bias, and now here's the missing ones. So evaluation bias occurs during model iteration and evaluation. It can arise when the testing or external benchmark populations do not equally represent the various parts of the used population. Evaluation bias can also arise from the use of performance metrics that are not appropriate for the way in which the model will be used. Okay, hopefully they have a better explanation for representation bias as well. That was kind of missing from the book. Representation bias arises while defining and sampling a development population. It occurs when the development population underrepresents and subsequently fails to generalize well for some part of the use population. Okay, so the final form of bias, I'm sure there's more, but just that this paper takes a broad view of, is deployment bias. And this occurs after the model deployment, when the system is used or interpreted in inappropriate ways. So a lot of, what was it called? I forget. But when you use a pre-trained model, you gotta watch out for deployment bias. All right, so give 2 examples of historical race bias in the USA. So here we go. So plenty of examples. Here are a few examples of historical race bias in the US from the New York Times article. Racial bias, even when we have good intentions, by the University of Chicago's Senhill Mulanathan. This guy. Okay, so when doctors were shown identical files, they were much less likely to recommend cardiac catheterization, a helpful procedure, to black patients. That sounds bad. That is bad. When bargaining for a used car, black people were, and that's the kind of thing too, though, like, you can't, and we're in a for-profit healthcare system too, it's like, that is just so bad. When bargaining for a used car, black people were offered initial prices $700 higher and received far smaller concessions. Alright, so we got our 2 examples. Let's read the rest of those examples though. Responding to apartment rental ads on Craigslist with a black name, Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors, elicited fewer responses than with a white name. an all-white jury was 16 percentage points more likely to convict a black defendant than a white one. When a white jury had one black member, it convicted both at the same rate. Oh yeah, and this was brought up in the video, and it's interesting that it only took one black jury member I think juries typically have 8 people in them. So instead of taking, you would think like, oh well, it would have to have half of the jury be black and half white, 50-50 for it to be unbiased. But according to this, it only took one black jury member. So that's almost a bit of a kind of a good news. Really, that it almost seems like people really aren't intending to be harmful in a lot of cases, and that's the point of the article. Good intentions is just, if there's no representation, there's no consideration. The Compass algorithm, I have taken the, oh no, okay. I've taken a 2-year school entrance exam that was called the Compass. I have not had sentencing and bail decisions made. Okay, so yeah. So here's an example of how this historical bias was put into an AI. It used names to yeah. So people with black names were unfairly labeled by this AI. Yep, any data set involving humans can have this kind of bias: medical data, sales data, housing data, political data, and so on. Because underlying bias is so pervasive, bias in data sets is very pervasive. Racial bias even turns up in computer vision, as shown in the example of auto-categorized photos shared on Twitter by a Google Photos user. So these are automatically categorized, and you can see it got the skyscrapers right. It got the airplanes right, even though it just had a picture of a wing. And myself, as a human, I didn't even know this was an airplane. I thought these were like pyramids or like greenhouses. It really took me a while to identify this as an airplane, even though I'm a human. But the AI got it right away for an airplane. And then cars got that right, but this is interesting because it says that these are bikes. But in my as a human, I would say that this is a bike rider more than it is a bike. This is a photo of a man, perhaps a teen, riding a bike more than it is just a photo of a bike. And then here, this is the most egregious example of the problem with this algorithm. These are clearly people. So to label them as gorillas is really a problem. So yeah, and now this one, I guess I don't understand. If there is something problematic with this labeling, I guess maybe this is where my own bias, because I am a white male, and but I'm from a decent background. Like I'm from a middle class background. So like I don't know why this would be an inappropriate. I mean, maybe like this where this is a person riding a bike, and the photo's not about the bike. And to say that is kind of denying this person of their humanity. So maybe that's why this would be a problematic label. But in my opinion, this doesn't seem too problematic because the fact that this man here is wearing these robes, in my opinion, would mean that graduation is an appropriate way to describe the photo. But here's the most obvious one. I think this one too definitely has problems as well. But this one, I guess I don't understand. Oh, you know what? I think it'll tell me. Nope. Okay, it doesn't have. So maybe that one didn't have a problem with labeling, but these two I think clearly do. Yeah, and I guess what I would like to see is if there was a white man or teen. This appears to be a teen. I can't really tell if this is a grown adult male or a teen. But if there were a photo similar like this with a white person, would it identify it as bikes or would it identify it differently? Okay, so what was the question again? I forgot. Um, where are most images in ImageNet from? Okay, so the vast majority of the images are from the United States and other Western countries, leading to models trained on, okay, so here's the answer right here. Oops, I didn't copy that correctly. Oops, I still got a problem here. There we go. Perfect. Next question. In the paper, does machine learning automate moral hazard and error? Why is synesthesis found to be predictive of stroke? Okay, I remember this from the video too. So, sinusitis, yeah, okay. So, however, only the top two have anything to do with a stroke. Based on what we've studied so far, you can probably guess why. We haven't really measured stroke, which occurs when a region of the brain is denied oxygen due to an interruption in the blood supply. What we've measured is who had symptoms, went to a doctor. So here's the answer to the question. What we've measured is who had symptoms, went to a doctor, got the appropriate tests, and received a diagnosis of stroke. Actually, having a stroke is not the only thing correlated with this complete list. It's also correlated with being the kind of person who actually goes to the doctor, which is influenced by who has access to healthcare, can afford their copay, doesn't experience racial or gender-based medical discrimination, and more. If you are likely to go to the doctor for an accidental injury, then you are likely to also go to the doctor when you are having a stroke. Okay, so what is representation bias? I think that's the one I had to look up. Here we go. So, in other words, notice that the models predicting occupation did not only reflect the actual gender imbalance in the underlying population, but actually amplified it. This type of representation bias is common, particularly for simple models. When there is some easy to see underlying relationship, a simple model will simply assume that this relationship holds all the time. Okay, so when there is some clear, easy to see underlying relationship, a simple model will simply assume that this relationship holds all the time. That's the answer to the question. What is representation? confrontation bias. How are machines and people different in terms of their use for decision making, for making decisions? Here we go. So human decision makers and algorithmic decision makers are not used in a plug-and-play interchangeable way in practice. So as the Arkansas healthcare example showed, well, I kind of want to hear that. So where's the Arkansas healthcare example? Oh, this is, okay, yeah. So this is what we just read about. Machine learning is often implemented in practice, not because it leads to better outcomes, but because it is cheaper and more efficient. Kathy O'Neill, in her book Weapons of Math Destruction, described the pattern of how the privileged are processed by people, whereas the poor are processed by algorithms. This is just one of a number of ways that algorithms are used differently than human decision makers. Others include people are more likely to assume algorithms are objective or error-free, even if they're given the option of a human override. Okay. Algorithms are more likely to be implemented with no appeals process in place. Algorithms are often used at scale. Algorithmic systems are cheap. Is this information the same as fake news? Some people think disinformation is primarily about false information or fake news. In reality, disinformation can often contain seeds of truth or half-truths taken out of context. Yeah, so it's different because often disinformation isn't fake news, it's true, but it's used in a way that is fake. It's almost like using something that is true in a way that makes it false. Ladislav Bittman was an intelligence officer in the USSR who later defected to the US and wrote some books in the 1970s and 1980s on the role of disinformation in Soviet propaganda operations. In the KGB and Soviet disinformation, he wrote, most campaigns are a carefully designed mixture of facts, half-truths, exaggerations, and deliberate lies. So disinformation has a history stretching back hundreds or even thousands of years. It is not necessarily about getting someone to believe something else, but rather often used to sow disharmony and uncertainty, and to get people to give up on seeking the truth. Receiving conflicting accounts can lead people to assume that they can never know whom or what to trust. In the US, this has hit close to home in recent years, with the FBI detailing a massive disinformation campaign linked to Russia in the 2016 election. Understanding the disinformation that was used in this campaign is very educational. For example, the FBI found that the Russian disinformation campaign often organized two separate fake grassroots protests, one for each side of an issue, and got them to protest at the same time. The Houston Chronicle reported on one of these odd events. Okay, so I'm very familiar with this, so I urge anyone who hasn't heard of this to keep reading about it. You can see the link here to read this part. Yeah, so let's move on, see if we can get these questions done pretty quick. I'm starting to kind of feel tired, so once I start to feel really tired, I won't be able to move on. Why is disinformation through auto-generated text a particularly significant issue? Okay, so let's see here. So oh, okay, so disinformation through auto-generated text is a particularly significant issue due to the greatly increased capability provided by deep learning. We discussed this issue in length when we delve into creating language models. One proposed approach is to develop some form of digital signature to implement it in a seamless way and to create norms that we should only trust content that has been verified. The head of the Allen Institute on AI wrote such a proposal in an article titled How Will We Prevent AI-Based Forgery? AI is poised to make high-fidelity forgery inexpensive and automated, leading to potentially disastrous consequences for, okay, so here's going to be my answer. For democracy, security, and society, the specter of AI forgery means that we need to act to make digital signatures de rigueur as a means of authentication and digital content. Alright, so what are the 5 ethical lessons described by the Markula Center? So here they are. So the first one is the rights approach. Which option best respects the rights of all who have a stake? And I would think you'd want to think about those who don't have a stake too, because, like, for example, if you design something that gives a certain group an advantage, is that a violation of another group's rights because now this one group has a special advantage. For example, the historical bias examples we've looked at before, where it's discriminated based on name or something like that. If you develop some sort of technology that basically can be used to name your baby something that will give them the most privilege and rights in society, but doing that causes a greater gap in that privilege and rights. Is that an ethical technology to develop? Alright, so the justice approach, which option treats people equally or proportionally? That's kind of well, perhaps it's not as easy as I think, but I was going to say that's perhaps one of the easier ones conceptually to think about. The utilitarian approach, which option will produce the most good and do the least harm? The common good approach, which option best serves the community as a whole, not just some members? Alright, and then the virtue approach, which option leads me to act as the sort of person I want to be? Okay, so where is policy an appropriate tool for addressing data ethics issues? That's an interesting question because I would think it would always be. Um, Here we go. So we often talk to people who are eager for technical or design fixes to be a full solution to the kinds of problems that we've been discussing. For instance, a technical approach to deep bias data or design guidelines for making technology less addictive. While such measures can be useful, they will often not be sufficient to address the underlying problems that have led to our current state. For example, as long as it is incredibly profitable to create addictive technology, companies will continue to do so regardless of whether this has the side effect of promoting conspiracy theories and polluting our information ecosystem. While individual designers may try to tweak product designs, we will not see substantial changes until the underlying profit incentives change. Okay, so witness policy, an appropriate tool for addressing data. I almost want to say policy is not uh, an appropriate tool. So to look at what can cause companies to take concrete action, consider the following two examples of how Facebook has behaved. In 2018, a UN investigation found that Facebook had played a determining role in the ongoing genocide of the uh, Rohingya, an ethnic minority in Myanmar, um, described by UN Security General Antonio Guterres as one of, if not the most discriminated people in the world. Oh my god, that sucks. Yeah, I've heard about this, but I haven't like really deeply looked into it. I didn't know that they could be considered the most discriminated people in the world. Local activists have been warning Facebook um, executives that their platform was being used to spread hate speech and incite violence since as early as 2013. In 2015, they were warned that Facebook could play the same role in Myanmar that the radio broadcasts played during the Rwandan genocide. And I'm actually really worried about that in the United States. I'm surprised that people aren't coming forward and really accusing Facebook and Twitter of playing that same role in the USA as well. Where 1 million people were killed, yet by the end of 2015, Facebook only employed 4 contractors that spoke Burmese. As one person close to the matter said, that's not 2020 hindsight. The scale of this problem was significant, and it was already apparent. Zuckerberg promised during the congressional hearings to hire dozens to protest the genocide in Myanmar. 2018, years after the genocide had begun, including the destruction by fire to set at least 288 villages in northwestern Shikan state after 2017. This stands in stark contrast to Facebook quickly hiring 1,200 people in Germany to try to avoid expensive penalties of up to 50 million euros under a new German law against hate speech. Clearly, in this case, Facebook was more reactive to the threat of a financial penalty than to the systematic destruction of an ethnic minority. Alright, so rights and policy, clean air and clean drinking water are public goods which are nearly impossible to protect through individual market decisions, but rather require coordinated regulatory action. Similarly, many of the harms resulting from unintended consequences of misuses of technology involve public goods, such as a polluted information environment or deteriorated ambient privacy. Too often, privacy is framed as an individual right, yet there are societal impacts to widespread surveillance, which would still be the case even if it was possible for a few individuals to opt out. Many of the issues we are seeing in tech are actually human rights issues, such as when a biased algorithm recommends that black defendants have longer prison sentences, when particular job ads are only shown to young people, or when police use facial recognition to identify protesters. The appropriate venue to address human rights issues is typically through the law. We need both regulatory and legal changes, and the ethical behavior of individuals. Individual society can't address misaligned profit incentives, externalities where corporations reap large profits while offloading their costs and harms to the broader society, or systematic failures. However, the law will never cover all edge cases, and it is important that individual software developers and data scientists are equipped to make ethical decisions in practice. Okay, so I'm having trouble finding a good answer to where is policy an appropriate tool for addressing data ethics, so I'm going to come up with my own. I'll say it is appropriate So it is appropriate when applied by a regulatory body with the authority to apply it, and when it delivers real consequences, such as fees to discourage improper incentives. Or neglect, because that's what I would think you would accuse Facebook of for that genocide, is neglect. It was very neglectful of them to not have more resources working on it. And to be honest, I don't even think, because they just didn't have many people who, it was hard for them to get people who spoke the language, but I honestly think if you just had like a bunch of engineers working on it, even if they didn't speak the language, they could probably make a good dent in it, because they could pretty quickly learn what the main words being used were, and figure out which language was harmful and which was benign. I don't think that would be too hard to figure out, even if you didn't speak the language. Alright, that's going to be it for this video. Kind of shared a bit more than I wanted to personally. I'm still going to post it. I hope I didn't. But I might go back and look at this a month or a year from now and kind of bang my head against the table at what my viewpoints were. But yeah, as of now, I don't think I said anything too controversial. If I did, I apologize preemptively. It's really not my intention. My intention is just to learn this chapter, get through this course, and work on this with my friends. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.